Hello everyone, my name is Andre and welcome to the PDHPE Pulse podcast. Today, joined by an incredible person, we are joined by Haydn Belshaw. Haydn, how you going, mate?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Just giving you a bit of background on Haydn. Haydn has a lifelong passion for aquatic sports with extensive experience as a coach and a mentor across swimming, water polo and surf lifesaving. He has been involved with the Water Polo Australia men's team, working at the elite level to support athlete development and performance on the international stage. In swimming, Haydn has coached and guided athletes from grassroots programs through to competitive squads, helping to grow participation excellence in the sport. Haydn is also has a strong connection to surf lifesaving, having worked with athletes and teams at Newport Surf Lifesaving Club, as well as Nutrigrain New South Wales and Australian representative squads. His work extends across the Oceania and Pacific Island regions, where he has been committed to growing aquatic sports and water safety programs, building pathways for communities with limited resources. That sounds so good. Haydn's focus is on fostering high performance while ensuring that swimming and water safety remains accessible for everyone, from local communities to elite and international competition. Also, one of the only guys that I can know that can do 100 meters underwater without taking a breath. God, I remember that day years ago. Bit of background as well. Haydn and I used to swim together many years ago. He was absolutely fantastic. I was okay. But back in the day of Hornsby Aquatic Centre before its renovations, they were really good times. So, Haydn, what are you doing with yourself at the moment? Where are you at career-wise with swimming?
So I have a company called Podium Sports Training Consulting, and I typically work with a lot of the private schools at the moment. They're going through I guess an area of building resources around swimming pools and facilities and gyms and connecting wellness to it as well. So doing a lot in that space. Also, as you mentioned before, working with Water Polo Australia and trying to help guide their athletes. And we just got an exciting, I guess, next phase on looking at the juniors that are coming through as well and trying to work out what we do to assist them, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then I guess from an educational point of view, still working very heavily in that space across the Pacific, but also internationally and locally as well. Very passionate about growing not only the sport, but also the people around it. So, I'm very fortunate that we've got Stone Grammar that's coming up and going out there and got a group of teachers as well as students that are looking to help give back in the community as well. So going out there to help support them, as I do in Sapphire and Forbes later in the year as well. So very lucky to be able to do something that I really enjoy.
Absolutely. And that's the dream, isn't it? Always finding that passion and going, I'm going to stick with this, and I love it. And just, it's incredible. And I think we both feel the same way, that being Australia, swimming is essential. It's important. We all know that, but I think it's absolutely non-negotiable essential, considering that a lot of our major cities are coastal. And considering that, many years ago, we had the heyday of watching Ian Thorpe and all those guys, really dominating the pool. From, going back to where you are, going back from where you were to where you are now, what inspired you to pursue, swimming in this fashion, in the coaching and the, and the support?
It's one of those funny things. I make a joke of it, particularly when I talk about the journey or the influence that the learner swim instructors have. And I remember my learner swim I actually did at Galston, down the road. So I used to have a half an hour drive through the gorge to my lesson, and for the first 3 years I cried through that 30 minutes down drive, and then I cried through my 30-minute lesson, and then I was really happy because on the back of it, not how it is now, but back then, like, killer pythons were like this big, so I used to get one at the back end of my lesson, and then that was the ritual. So whatever afternoon it was, mum or dad would drive me down there, they get me to get my parents to either swim in the water or they kick them out. They tried everything, but I really had a bad experience for a long period of time, and my parents still don't understand, what I do. I think they're scarred from that, but obviously through the journey after that, I found a real love, and have been very fortunate to have some great instructors and great coaches to help kind of guide me and find that love. And yeah, so it's quite strange from where I first started to kind of where I am now, and maybe that's part of why I do what I do, because I don't want people to go through that same experience. And as you mentioned, like, this is a lifelong skill, and this is something that is more than a sport. It's a way of life. And I talk to parents and even other instructors about where do people go on holidays, and it might be the overseas fancy trips and all that, but it's always by water. They're camping by lakes, and they're going to their beach houses and fancy things like that. But we're surrounded by water wherever we go, and it's such an important skill that it's just something that we really need to make sure that we really follow through and continue what's been traditionally in the past, in terms of always learning this lifelong skill, to a point where people, parents as well, are comfortable that their kids are safe, or reasonably safe around water.
Yeah. And I'm glad we're discussing this, because going into term one, we're going to be starting our learn to swim programs and swimming programs in schools. But what I find interesting is that there's a new syllabus rolling out in K to 6, particularly in PDHPE, and swimming is no longer compulsory. Having a quick comb before this chat on the syllabus, there's only one word, one phrase, and one point that discusses water safety. And it's not even in the practical component. It's more the awareness and making decisions around water.
Correct.
From your experience, in coaching and water safety, do you think this is a huge drawback, for schools, not having it compulsory in the syllabus, but recommended that it could be done?
I really struggle with this. I'm very fortunate with a lot of the schools that I deal with, that they have access to facilities, which is fantastic. A lot of those are opting to continue down, not necessarily the compulsory, I really don't like that word, but understand the mechanics that go behind it, but really trying to I guess look to incorporate the water safety elements in different elements within their PDHPE classes, which, as I said, is really important. The challenge is those schools that don't have access, and those students that don't have access to those pools is really challenging. When we're having this, I guess, informal discussion about what to talk about today, I was going through and I was having a look at some of the old notes that I made when I was reviewing some of the elements when it comes time for school swim programs, and as recent as just before COVID, I was having a look and did a bit of an analysis, and looked at the costing side of things, because we understand, and certainly more so these days than previous, the costs associated with living are very different to where they were previously. But I was having a look at lessons, and generally for like an intensive, they'd go for their 2 weeks, they'd do their 10 lessons, and in 10 years, it had moved from $5.50 to $6.60. So it moved, $1. So essentially $10 over a 2-week period. But if you have a look at the price that was associated with the school buses, that was 400% different, which is a huge amount when you have a look at the difference between the two. Even having a look and looking at some of the budgets, about even going through, and recently I was talking to somebody about school swimming carnivals, and there's obviously a separate topic, but similar type principle around not continuing with that. And I was having a look, and schools are paying $15,000 for one day to transfer their students from school to the venue and then back to school again. This is where the problem lies, that it's the access to it, the financial constraints around it, that really dictate where and why this is such a prevalent issue at the moment, because it's not from the swimming side of things, but it's the external barriers that come with the access.
Yeah, and I can completely understand with that. And a lot of schools that I've spoken to as well, it's not essentially the actual program. The programs are always great. It's like you said, it's the getting there, it's the cost of getting this, cost of getting back. And even looking at timetables, it's managing when is this going to fit within a timetable. So schools and the logistics, they have their challenges, and sometimes they have their hands tied of what they can do and when they can do it. And sometimes when they can do it is not a feasible time for both transports and the facilities as well. It's difficult. I totally support you in the fact that it really needs to be done. It really needs to happen. What are your thoughts on, schools having just that primary 2-week program? Because a lot of schools, when they run their swimming program, they do have their 1 week or 2 week intensives. Do you feel long term that's enough, or do you feel that should be more of a gateway to this is what it's going to look like? You should pursue something once a week, twice a week.
I think it's certainly a gateway. I think it's something's better than nothing. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's the long-term solution. It's really interesting because whilst we're talking about it in a PDHPE space, if we look at our next phase of life, it's really interesting to see some of what would be the norms around even employment opportunities are very different. So I'm working with a group at the moment that traditionally over the years have been fine in terms of their recruiting because of the system that has previously been in place in terms of learn to swim into some sort of squad training, whether it be recreational or competitive, and they come out on the other side and they're reasonably competent enough to do this particular job. The problem now is they're having people join in or wanting this career but aren't able to do it because they don't have the swimming capabilities. And I'm not talking about small numbers. I'm talking about a third of the recruits that are coming in that are unable to go through and complete the basics around it. So it's really limiting job opportunities outside of the school if we look at it from a longer term. If we bring it back to PDH or school space, as I said, the 2 weeks is great, and I think that the consistency on continually and rather than a 1 a week type situation where you kind of take one step forward, one step back, on a longer term, that works really well. But the whole idea of coming in for a 2 week period and going through and learning these these skills, because it's not necessarily about the next phase of learning how to do butterfly or anything like that. These are basic elements around flotation, buoyancy, movement through water, safety skills, like little things that are really important. It's quite interesting because only yesterday came up in my feed that one of the Cronulla players was can't swim, so around the recovery, little things like that that really creep in to go, whilst it's or perceived as something that quite small at I guess a young age, can be quite profound as they move through their life as well.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, we both come from a swimming background. I found that swimming was my gateway to PDHP, become a teacher. That was the very first sport that I picked up that I felt confident doing and actually got pretty decent and pretty good quite quickly. For everyone listening, I just remember Haydn being this incredible breaststroker. I remember years ago, he may not remember it, but I remember I raced him and I was doing freestyle and he beat me in breaststroke. Totally not rigged, but I remember it very, very clearly. It was a fun race.
But a bit too kind.
For some people, it's, this is their sport. This is their gateway. This is the one thing that they can do and go, it's because of school. It's because of those swimming lessons that I found this. And, moving away from more of a lifestyle, perspective, it's incredibly wonderful for mental health. It's incredibly wonderful for finding gross motor skills, coordination. What have you seen in your experience, how swimming can really, really enhance mental health and just fundamental movement skills?
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting that you talk about I guess your opportunity that you had, and I was very similar. I
Mm,
really liked other sports, and I tried, basketball and soccer and all
mm,
that stuff, but that wasn't, that wasn't me.
mm,
And I really enjoyed the training side of things, and obviously the
mm,
racing as well. But for me, it gave me, and like this, similar to the conversation around the swimming carnival, it gives opportunity for people like us that didn't excel in those other areas to really
mm,
showcase in front of our peers at our school swimming carnival, how and what all of this hard work that we've done, was really all about. And it's one of those things that I really kind of see that we're starting to now, I guess, miss in terms of those conversations around
mm,
potentially not continuing on with our swimming carnival in that as well. But if we
mm,
look at the other social aspects, the fun side of things, and I guess, that's also around, how and what, learn to swim traditionally was to probably, if we start thinking about where and what we need to, be looking at now. I've been starting to, I've been very fortunate. I was asked by World Aquatics to help to sorry, this program called Discover Water. And the whole idea is around participation. It's all about fun, engagement. 6 to 12 years old is the market essentially looking at, and looking at physical literacy. So looking
mm,
at other elements that aren't the traditional, you move from this to then to that to that to then you start your swimming progress.
mm,
Looking at the social aspects, the emotional aspects, the connection, how and what. And this is a worldwide project, but if I look at back from a Pacific or an Oceania point of view, what are the traditions? What are some of the connection elements that come with swimming between the student or the child and
mm,
also the water side of things as well? So, from that, I think it's really important that it's not just about the physical elements that go with it. It's
mm,
certainly the other elements, as you mentioned, about the well-being side of things. How can we develop holistically rather than just looking at the physical elements that go with it? There's
yeah,
certainly other elements of the social connection,
mm,
the other emotional connections that people have. And it is different, like, we talk about soccer and basketball and all those kinds of things, and you have that connection with your coach as well, but this is really the time, particularly if we look at learn to swim, a lot of faith by both the teacher, sorry, the parent, but also the child, because you go and the instructor lets the child go and they drop to the bottom of the pool. There's
mm,
some quite severe outcomes that come with that. Bit different when you're running on an oval and you fall over, you kind of stand up and
mm,
up you go. So there's a lot
yeah,
of I guess that rapport becomes really important early on
mm,
for somebody to just go through and relax and actually start to learn those skills rather
yeah,
than just have that fearfulness of the water that comes with it. So
mm.
the instructor or the coach becomes a really important connection piece for that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful program that you're spearheading. I think that's incredible. So well done with that. That's a huge thing. So well done.
Oh, it's very exciting. It's very,
Yeah.
very, very humbled.
It just occurred to me as well, even growing up, we had pool parties. We had parties where we'd go to mates' places and go for a swim, and on the weekends we'd drive to the beach when we got our license. It was kind of a bit of a coming of age thing. You get your P's and you go to McDonald's and then you go to the beach. So that in that social aspect, it sounds so silly, but for people that's massive. Going to
Mm.
pool parties and actually being able to participate, not being fearful of water in general. It's biased or not, I think I still really, really passionate about just learning the skills. And we can all agree that it's like a bike. I haven't done a couple of laps in, a few years, but I can tell you now I'd be able to confidently hop in and dive in and do a couple of laps and feel pretty confident as well. Do you see that as well, that when you see students or people that you've coached in the past, they have a large gap, they're still confident in the water. There's no, there's no nervousness of going back. What have you seen?
Yeah, I guess it's quite different to where it was to where it is now in terms of if we look at the spectrum. But
Mm,
certainly for those that I've been fortunate enough to coach over the years, one of the things that I've really set swimming apart. Not from all sports, but
mm,
certainly it's kind of that it's swim for life.
yeah.
From 6 months or even younger, through to 96 or even older.
Mm,
It's one of those sports that you can continually do all the time. It
mm,
doesn't have that same kind of rigorous, body impact and things like
yeah.
that. So, it's also about the love for it, and how much, and talking to people like yourself that haven't swum for a period of time. I'm in the same boat, so
Mm,
I'm certainly not trying to preach or anything, but the fact that we're still not actively doing it, is kind of a little bit of a shame, as well. And it's a time thing, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not
mm,
saying that it's easy done, but like that love, really want to try and foster and continue that. Whereas I've got people that send me a text the other day going, hey, just jumped in the water, try to do 50 meters of butterfly, can't do it anymore, thought of you laughing at me, and you have those kinds of things as well, where
mm,
it's a bit of fun. But the fact that people are comfortable and confident, and as we get into different ages, like yourself, and the
mm,
next generation that are having kids, those that feel comfortable in the water, taking their kids to lesson, very different environment than those that don't come from a swimming background and are quite tense and uptight. It's a very different vibe when it comes time for even those baby classes, having parents
mm,
involved that aren't comfortable, wanting the
mm,
best thing, which is great for their child because they want them to be able to swim and
mm.
don't have those same experiences, but don't have that same comfortability in the water as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've mentioned that really sort of resonated with me is that it's a family thing as well, getting the parents in with, as young as possible to get that exposure, to get that experience and familiarity of, this is water, this is okay. Um, Classically, we've all heard this story is that, best way to teach someone how to swim is just throw them in the pool. We've all heard those stories. Let's bust a myth. Is that the best way to do it? Just get someone, throw them in the water, swim back, bang, you can learn to swim. Is that the best way?
Not quite. Not
Excellent.
quite. Not
I
quite.
agree.
It certainly used to be that, but
Yeah.
no, we want it to be a pleasant experience, want it to be enjoyable. So, for me, I talk about, and we're talking about the babies before, like I talk to those parents and say, get them in the bath. Have some, fun in the bath, those kinds of things. Make it an enjoyable experience. The more that they enjoy doing it and the more often they get exposed to it, the better off it's going to be. Having them everyone gets in the bath every day. Throw a cup in there, get them to play with water. If they don't like it on the face, that's fine. Just get them playing, putting it on their arms, put it on their legs. There's simple ways that they can do it more often in shorter spouts rather than trying to go, okay, now we got our lesson because it's Thursday afternoon. Let's get in the water with some strange bloke that has a shaved head, looks very different to mum, and everything's going to be fun. It
Yeah.
doesn't quite work like that.
That's right. Speaking about learn to swim in adults, there's a news article that I read that in 2025, more adults are participating in learn to swim programs and learning how to swim. I personally think that's incredible. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a really good example that, you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Absolutely.
The process of learning those new tricks may be a little bit slower, but I still think that, at ages beyond us, people are still wanting to learn new skills as well. Are you finding that a lot in your industry as well, that, water polo and, even surf, that there's a lot of an older generation that is still either participating or they're learning?
Absolutely. Like you talk about the adults, and one of the biggest changes for me was we did a marketing campaign at one of my old swim schools, and we had a like almost like an expression of interest. We had more people in teenage slash adult learn to swim than we did about normal learn to swim, which was just phenomenal because I was going through and thinking, okay, around the marketing side of things, really need to push to, parents with kids and all that stuff. And we missed, more than 50% of the market by focusing or targeting that rather than thinking more broadly around, the adult learn to swim or even the teenager learn to swim. And it's how you create that environment as well. Because for those that are a little bit older, that haven't got that swimming background, that are trying to learn a new skill, it's really embarrassing coming in and swimming with a 4 or 5 year old, so it's how you create that environment and when you create that environment that's really important. The skills are still the same or the competency is still the same, but it's very, very different. As talking to a junior school, student or a primary school student is very different to talking to a senior school or a secondary school student. Not necessarily the information needs to be different, but how it's delivered, I think, is really important because it's not talking down, it's talking at the same level where they understand what's going on and you're trying to help and assist them. You can take that to the next level and talk about water polo and surf lifesaving. I had plenty of surf lifesavers like, swimming's my weakest link or a leg of the iron. How and what can we do to improve that? All those things. Water polo is the same. I'm working with someone at the moment, and she's in that center position, really strong and all that stuff, but her swimming is that weaker element of her skills. So whether it be at a beginner stage or those that are looking to break into the world stage, we have people that have the same essentially wants and needs in terms of trying to help and develop their own learn to swim.
Do you find as well, looking at the caliber of swimmers that we have now versus the caliber of swimmers that we had, let's say in our heyday, 2006, do you feel that swimmers at a higher level are just better? I went to watch the Nationals last year, and some of the times that these, young men and women are clocking for the 50 meters free is just ridiculous. I remember, breaking the 30 seconds for 50 meters freestyle, like that was a pinnacle moment. Now it's kind of like not even a qualification time. It's just a thing. Do you find that once you've made that entry point swimming and get to that elite level, it's very different?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was having a conversation with, somebody that's, on the outside of swimming, and it was a really good conversation because it's the exact same comments about, how, why they're swimming so fast. From an inside, there have been so many technical element changes within swimming from back then to where they are now, that, have really kind of moved the, I guess, the benchmark when it comes time for swimming. And I think, a lot of what we do these days in terms of coaching is looking at the athletes and looking at making tweaks. I remember certainly early on in my coaching career, it was I knew what the stroke model was and everyone had to swim like that, which was to the detriment of some, and for others, it really improved them. But probably, when you're looking at, trying to change that top or that 10%, it's a lot harder to do than when you've got 80% to work on as well. So, the real change in the coaching elements, the coaching methodology, and also the training has really kind of like stepped up to where those next levels. I remember the same, going to, you mentioned 2006. I can remember early on, even in the back end of the late 90s, watching two New Zealand boys in our age group in the 14s go 25:01 to equal the gold medal at the national championships. Now, that's 27th, so it's been a real shift. But also you have a look, and there's been a lot of discussions around Cam McAvoy and his training methodology, and Kyle's the same in terms of where they are and what they're doing now that they're a bit older, and which is very important that they've still had that base, and now they're working on those finer elements. That there was an article on the other day that Cam came out and said between X and Y period of time, he swam, 6 lots of 10-meter sprints, so, it's very different to how and what we did previously to where we are now in terms of, some of those training methodologies, but also the technical aspects that go with it as well. And the technology that we use around, videos, like I never saw myself swim ever, but now we're using videos, underwater, on top of the water, giving analysis for athletes. So, we're in a very different situation these days.
Absolutely. And I'm the same as you. I only ever saw myself swim maybe once, and that was when, my mum filmed me on her camera phone, and that was it. When someone is training, and this was a myth that I'm sure that you've heard of before, and it's something that I fell into when I was training, that it's all, your progress is all about the hours you do in the pool. More hours is going to equal more progress. I remember, I think you may remember this phrase of doing Horror Week, where you had to accumulate X amount of kilometers in the week. And I think it went up to 50 kilometers in the week. So that was 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, or a 4 and 6. And, do you feel, knowing modern training pedagogy, that is dated? It's not about the hours. Is there more to it than just doing more?
I think it's very dated. But everyone has their own methodology and their coaching philosophy as well. So I don't disregard what people do and say and think, because we still have some extremely successful coaches within Australia that still have that same methodology, and for some it works really well, and for others it doesn't work very well at all. I was having a coffee with someone the other day and talking about some of these elements around how, from a PT point of view, how do we progress in swimming versus how they do it in a traditional gym. And I was talking very much about, like, for me, it's not what the number is at the end of the session. It might be that they swam 2,000 meters, and in that 2,000 meters, but how much was actually in those different energy systems, or how much was actually done as effort versus a easy swim. Yes, you could argue that there's repetition, and there's still muscles being used and all that stuff, but essentially, unless you're doing things at kind of 60% or greater, you really get very little physical change out of that. Not to say that you don't do it, because drills and skills and all those kinds of things we need to, certainly do easily, but that's where it becomes really important around the technical or technique aspect of it as well. Whereas, for me, we're talking about, from a water polo perspective, we swim for 40 minutes to an hour twice a week, at a national team program who are swimming quite well. And it's just a shift, it's just a focus as well, because a lot of the old school discussions, and I had this certainly at Surf Lifesaving for quite a while, they knew they were doing really well when they're doing 10 100s on 115 or whatever it might be. But for me, I'm like, I that teaches somebody how to be a 5-minute 400 freestyler. And same with water polo. I don't want that. I want them to be pushing a break 4 minutes, So how can we create a training session or environment where, we might be swimming on 2 minutes 30, but they've got to break the minute every single time. And so they're now training themselves actually in a different energy system, a different zone, to actually be able to actually swim a 4 minute, not a 5-minute 400 freestyle. So I think if we start looking at those hell weeks and those things, I think that they have their time and their place. Certainly if you manage it correctly, because I think that there's a mental aspect to it. I think that there's some team elements that come with somebody not necessarily being able to keep up, and there's some opportunities for some leadership there as well. But I don't think it's the way to move forward. No.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you as well. I think going into 2025, there are certainly, many ways to, really push the human body as well, including, things that aren't even in the water. I'm a big fan of resistance training. I do it quite regularly, and I'm a big supporter of there is a very much a place for land-based training, particularly in these sports as well. Do you
Absolutely.
find in your experience as well, water polo, surf, that external outside training certainly has a really positive impact on their pool performance?
Oh, absolutely. And it's also how it complements as well. So
Mm,
something that we're really conscious of at the moment with water polo is making sure that the gym or the strength side of the program, really complements what's happening in the pool and vice versa.
mm,
Because there's no use going through and trying to smash them in the gym, smash them in the water. Like it
of
just doesn't
course.
quite
Yeah.
work like that. But it's also how or what is the transferable elements
Mm,
that make it because you can go through and do, as many bench presses as you want, but is that really helping the athlete become a better
mm,
athlete? So I think that it's more about what activities that you're doing as part of it. But dry
mm,
land is really important, from, range of motion, injury prevention, the social aspect, something different, a stimulus. I
mm,
think, sometimes we forget as coaches, these sports are meant to be fun. So what
yeah.
fun elements can we bring into it to actually keep the kids in, and I say kids, whether they're 6 months or my 26-year-old blokes,
Mm,
the fun aspect needs to be in it. What competitive elements can you include that are going to be of benefit? We do
yeah.
this thing where we go through and we chase and it's only a six stroke sprint, but they actually have to push off the wall and catch the other person that has to turn from the flags and swim, and they
Mhm,
love it. Like it's something
mm,
really simple, it's fun, but I really get some really sharp fine motor skills when it comes time for that as well. So
yeah.
the outcomes there, the competitiveness there, but they have fun as well. And I think that if nothing else out of this, having that fun element really keeps them engaged and really wants them to actually want to do more.
Yeah. And I think people forget that no matter what age you are, that is a huge, huge valued thought of, am I enjoying it? Because the enjoyment's going to lead to many other motivating factors of your purpose, how hard you're going to train, how you're going to turn up to training. And I think that's a huge thing that we neglect as well, is how you're actually turning up versus how you're leaving as well. All right, last question. We've established that swimming is important. We want to do it. There's many different reasons why we should do important, why it's important rather. Um, Talking about schools and parents and families, what advice would you give, those communities, to get them involved in swimming?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And if I had the answer to it, I
Hmm.
think that we would be in a much greater position. But everyone's in a different situation. So it's really difficult, as we were talking about, costs associated with those, but, if we look at it at its core, swimming, we're surrounded by water.
Yeah.
The reason why I got involved in the Pacific was one year I was looking at what could I do? What could I give back to swimming
Mm,
that's been so good for me? And I got a report out of Fiji that, you know, drowning was the second highest rate of death in the country. And I was like, wow, like that is just like phenomenal. Like
mm.
if you've seen them drive and that's lower than that, that's anyway. The fact is that we've got it's such a skill for life that they need for everyday life. We can't avoid, we can't get around it, at all. And I think if we have a look at the social aspects, the connections, the engagement that we can also include in that, I think that that's something that both from a PDHPE point of view, but also a parent point of view, have a look at those elements. Those you spoke about the fine motor skills, gross motor skills that they're learning. Swimming, gymnastics, really great programs that they can get involved with that actually helps develop the child's physical literacy, across a broad range of elements that also then helps, go through and create other elements that we don't talk about around.
Absolutely.
time management, and for somebody to be a professional or a high level athlete and fit in school, which they generally do really well, and all those things, there's a lot of other skills that come with being in this space as well. If we look at from a school specifically, the broader aspects, and this is where the challenge is at the moment. We have a lot of older students that aren't participating in water because they feel embarrassed. So all these different I don't like the word excuses, but a lot of these things come in where the notes come in why they can't participate in their PDHPE, whereas the next day you see them running around on the oval, and that's kind of the reality. And I understand from a teacher's point of view as well, because I've had those conversations where the teacher's just sick of dealing with 9 students in the water while the others are sitting on the sideline doing something else. So they're having to prepare 2 lots of activities, one for those that aren't engaged in the swimming program and those that are as well. So if we could come up with something that helps to encourage that, and I think it really starts with what's happening in our junior or primary school as well. The problem is, well, from my side of things, I see they come into Year 7 swimming carnival, they're all excited, all that stuff. Participation's really high, and then they see that there's not a lot of others that are going through and swimming. And so Year 8, Year 9, it starts to dwindle from there as well. They don't know what they don't know. So if we can change that culture, I think that we'll have much better outcomes. And if we have them more engaged, we have that safe environment, we have the opportunity for them to actually be involved in swimming programs, I really think that it's going to be able to really help them holistically, because it's not just about the physical side of things.
Yeah. And yeah, you've nailed it on the head. I couldn't agree with you more. And I really relate more from the resilience perspective as well. It's that if you really want to know what it's like to really push yourself and both succeed and on the other side of the coin feel really let down, you do swimming. I know we can both agree that there's times where our training has really paid off, and you've just looked at you've finished a race, you've turned around, you looked at the time, and you've just gone, got it. And then you've turned around, you looked at the time, you think, I thought I went way faster than that. And even coping through that, because no one can say anything to make you better. It's the management of working yourself through it and then just moving forward. And I think swimming and water-based sports has a lot to teach us about resilience and never giving up and just pushing and pushing and pushing. Haydn, this has been the best. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and knowledge. Where can people contact you to discuss swim programs and just get your general advice and possibly work with you in the future?
So as I mentioned early on, I've got a company called Podium Sports Training Consulting. You can look it up on the website. Has all my contact details, email, phone call. Anyone that wants to talk to me about swimming, get a chair and sit back, and we will have a chat for as long as you like, because I'm one of those aquaholics that just love to talk about anything aqua. And so absolutely, more than welcome to have a discussion, whether it be at an individual level, at a school level, pedagogy side of things. More than happy to have those discussions.
Fantastic. What I'll do is I'll put all your details in the show notes as well, so they can have the ease of contacting you. Haydn, thank you very much. We really appreciate the time. My name's Andre. This is Haydn, and you've been listening to the PDHPE Pulse podcast. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.